Thanks for listening to Curious Cat, where we explore the shadowy space where science and the supernatural collide. I'm your host, Jennifer Holtz. Join me every week to examine what it means to be a soul in a meat suit. Welcome to Curious Cat. This week's episode is 2/3 teaching you the CIA-approved method for remote viewing and 1/3 true, or should I say prue, crime. I'm being overly dramatic, but the masterclass I took online to learn the what's and the how's of remote viewing, or RV, was presented largely by a woman named Prudence Calabrese. A year after filming, she dropped off the radar and her company, Transdimensional Systems, the single most successful RV venture, went kaput. I dug into the reasons behind this and found a documentary I'd love to share about that, which is, it's not just about that, it's about a lot, but that's part of the end of it. And it's free on YouTube. I'm realizing I jumped way ahead again, didn't I? So let's start at the beginning. Remote viewing, or what insiders call RV, what is it, where and how was it developed? From Columbia Journals, during the Cold War years, the USA and Soviet Union were known to have been spying on each other using the services of psychic remote viewers with the specific objective of gathering intelligence information of military significance. So in simple terms, remote viewing is the ability of human participants to acquire information about spatially and temporally remote geographical targets otherwise inaccessible by any known sensory means. I found more history of RV from Gaia. Many of us experience this from time to time as an intuitive flash of insight that turns out to be correct. Well, many well-known entrepreneurs and business people like Thomas Alva Edison and Akio Morita, who is the co-founder of Sony, they've attributed their business success to this ability. And we've all seen natural psychics perform seemingly amazing feats of mental skill on television. So the difference between natural psychic receptivity and remote viewing is that the latter is a trained skill, a controlled process that the average person can learn to do to some degree or another, they say. So the article goes on to explain more, that money and resources were given by the Central Intelligence Agency to Stanford Research Institute, or SRI, located on the campus of Stanford University at the time, to test the possibility of remote viewing. The goal was to disprove that psychic functioning was real. No one wanted it to exist. It was the last thing that the military establishment wanted to worry about, especially if it was a new Soviet threat. Physicists Russell Targ and Hal Puthoff, working at SRI, were tasked with determining whether extrasensory perception, or ESP, and related phenomena were real or not. Targ and Puthoff set about to locate some natural psychics and test them. Their first subject was artist, psychic, and scientist Ingo Swann of New York City, who had demonstrated an ability to accurately remote view weather in various American cities. He had published some articles about ESP and also psychokinesis, which is the ability to mentally affect distant objects, when he worked with researcher Gertrude Schmiedler of City College, New York, and the American Society for Psychical Research. Working with Schmiedler, Swann had shown that he could affect the temperature of thermistors, even if they were sealed in insulated thermos canisters 25 feet away from him. So at a friend's request, Swann sent his published findings to Puthoff, who asked Swann to come to SRI and demonstrate these abilities. The first thing they had Swann do was to see if he could affect a super-sensitive electromagnetically shielded quark detector buried 5 feet underground in a cement floor. Every time Puthoff asked Swan to think about the detector, which is used to detect subatomic particles, the readings from the device would noticeably deviate from the baseline readings. Puthoff was convinced that Swan had special abilities, and so the program to test and develop remote viewing began. So at first they had Swan view objects in a box. This was a practice he was good at, but quickly became bored with. Swan said to them, "I can view anything in the universe. This is a trivialization of my abilities." A few days later, he came up with a new way to do remote viewing map coordinates. Targ and Puthoff went out and bought the biggest atlas they could find at the local bookstore. Swan's coordinate map viewing turned out to be a huge success. A critic at the Central Intelligence Agency suggested that maybe he had memorized the entire global map. Swan went on to use randomly chosen numerical coordinates to view randomly selected events, people, and structures from around the planet. He performed equally well using this coordinate-based viewing system. One final nugget from that Gaia article, Swan coined the term remote viewing to describe the process, though you can question whether the information is actually remote to the viewer or whether the process is entirely visual. Some people are more sensitive to auditory, kinesthetic, or other types of sensory information, and few viewers actually see the target very clearly. Nonetheless, the name stuck and was sufficient to convince the intelligence agencies to fund the project. Other viewers were also tasked to help Targ and Puthoff understand remote viewing. Pat Price, a former police commissioner from Burbank, California, also proved to be an excellent viewer. Price used his own system to view where he actually imagined that he was at the distant target site. His results were so good that the CIA hired him to work for them directly. Back east, another natural viewer, Joe McMoneagle, also known as Remote Viewer Number 1, worked directly with the U.S. Army and the Defense Intelligence Agency. He was also tested and found to have amazing abilities to describe and sketch distant locations. Upon retirement, McMoneagle was awarded a Legion of Merit Award, in part for his 5 years of remote viewing missions for the military and various government agencies. Swan was able to describe with great precision what he was doing with his mind and attention as he was viewing, an ability other viewers did not have. So this allowed him to come up with a 6-stage system that could be taught to anyone, including me or you, and it became known as CRV, or Coordinate or Controlled Remote Viewing. So Swan's CRV system is based on separating out signal from noise in your mind as you're viewing. All the information is recorded during the session, but the viewer puts the noise in a different place on the paper than the signal. At the end of the session, you can separate them from one to another. The method became the basis of the remote viewing protocols that the U.S. Army taught to several groups of viewers. The program lasted until 1995, when it was declassified, and about $20 million was spent over those 2 decades. At the top, I said I took a masterclass online to learn how to remote view for myself. And I've provided a link in the show notes to that YouTube tutorial, largely taught by Prudence Calabrese of Transdimensional Systems. And at the very beginning, we were told the side effects of RV, and those are a need for more calories, a need for more water. You can get very dehydrated when you're remote viewing, so she always had water handy. She warned us not to consume drugs or alcohol while remote viewing. And she mentioned that mugwort, either consumed as a tea or inhaled as an incense, increases hits or accurate remote reading of details. Chocolate, too, has the same effect. So I love that. She then gave us a couple fun facts that middle-aged women postmenopausal are the absolute best seers. Their prime years are between 50 and 65. Menstruating women are also up at the top too. Gay men as well are in that top 3. She didn't speculate why this was, but just said that careful record taking over the course of years has proven this over and over again. But she said everybody can do it and everybody can be trained to do it and can be trained to get better at it. Next, she told the first and most important rule of remote viewing, which is remote viewing is fun. You come to it with an attitude of whimsy, of fun, of excitement. And if you are trying to practice and you feel burnt out, step away because you are going to decrease your odds that you actually are viewing something remotely. So this attitude, it truly increases the likelihood of what they call a scanning session. Next, we turn to the administrative stuff, which made up much of that very first class. With Prue explaining the steps, we filled out page 1 for a session. And you just take a piece of notebook paper and you only fill out the front side. And you're going to use the front side of multiple pages of paper. That information doesn't really translate to audio, but it demands specific and consistent information so that at any time, forever after, any person can pick up your scan sheet and gather who you are, the time, the date, the condition of the reader and the moderator, the directive, which is what the target is, the tag, which is a random digit assigned to the target, and it also includes a fake name that you are supposed to use and the moderator, if there's one, that what they're currently using. And yeah, fake names. That's how serious this is. And you're probably wondering why, but that's because if you extract sensitive information, you could find yourself the enemy of some other entity. So like say you locate a nuclear submarine that is Russian in origin and there's, that's part of your scanning, right, of this geolocation. You do not want your real name on that scan sheet because from here on out, you're a super spy in a sense. So you fill out the top information and then you draw a straight line across the width of the paper and write the letter T beneath it. Then the moderator reads the directive identifier or tag, which is a random number. It's usually 9 or so digit number. And we're instructed to write the number as they say it. And then without hesitation, draw a gestalt figure that comes to us. And I'll back up. A gestalt figure, that was a new term for me. It's a super simple one-line drawing, like a scribble almost, that's the most base or primitive way to express something. Say a sentient being, which is expressed as a curlicue, and a mountain, which is a up and down, like a mountain would be. Energetics are diagonal waves. A structure is any 90-degree angle. It can be upside down, right side up, to the side. Any 90-degree angle is some sort of structure. Water is a smooth up and down wave, and a flat surface is expressed as a straight line. So it's all very common sense. It's said that gestalts are something that we all have in our DNA. We know them innately. It was incredible. My inner thought as the moderator spoke the directive identifier was, I'll never be able to do this. What am I thinking? And then all of a sudden, my hand drew an upside down curlicue. It's the gestalt for a sentient being, but drawn upside down indicates the target is dead or inactive, which I found super curious, and I didn't find out that till a little later. The videographer was filming over the participants' shoulders after a few minutes, and everyone had drawn a curlicue. I thought that was crazy, unbelievable. I had to wonder who Prue, the moderator, had in mind when she led us through this opening exercise, because clearly in the decade that's passed since the filming, and I gave a try, well, that target had become inactivated or was possibly dead. And I gotta say, that was my biggest frustration with the YouTube class, is that there were times like this when they forgot to, or somehow it ended up on the editing floor, that They didn't reveal the target, and they didn't tell you what she had in mind, because I really like to check my homework. Also, the film quality wasn't great. And so it was really difficult to, when they revealed the picture that they'd been working off of, you couldn't really see it very well. And after you've been sitting for what are scans, and you actually do 4 of them per target, you've done a lot of work, but you can't really check yourself. So I was a little frustrated with that. So next, after that Gestalt drawing, we were led through the steps to flesh out our scans. So for step 1, we trace the Gestalt with our non-dominant hand, like your finger. Imagine running it over the curlicue with a finger. While with our dominant hand, we wrote words to describe the motion our pen made when we were creating the Gestalt. So in the case of the curlicue, I wrote up and around, but opposite the way I usually draw it. For step B, we tap on the Gestalt with our pens, poking it to the point in some cases of making a hole in our paper. And then we write the Gestalt, which was a sentient being, and very base level descriptors for what we sense by touch. So soft, organic, harder in places. And we're supposed to aim for 5 words. The next step, step C, we further describe the target. We write it all down as it comes to mind, no matter how brief it flies past. You may even get additional shapes, other elemental details like airy or hot, texture details like gritty or smooth. Prue and John, who taught us further into the tutorial, they encourage seers to use all of their senses. Even reach out your hands as though the object is there in front of you. You turn it over, you hold the Gestalt we drew on our paper up to our noses, and we sniff it. We hold it to our ear and listen. We write all these observations down on paper. Finally, in step D, we draw what we see in our mind's eye. I lost my focus on the class when a participant asked if she could name it as a house, if that's what she saw. And there was a huge debate about not labeling things and why we aren't supposed to label things with names. Truly, that made me lose my focus. But I skipped forward and we did another exercise, and it was the information that came to me in shaky, insecure whispers that ended up being the most spot on. Gaia had a great explanation of what type of information is solicited with RV. They said, quote, "When someone asks you to describe something, you normally proceed to name what you're perceiving using nouns and syllables. Remote viewing is the opposite. You begin by describing your perceptions without trying to identify anything about what they mean or what the larger picture is. You begin with basic gestalts, fundamental, general components of the target site, like whether it's man-made or living or natural. You then proceed to basic colors, smells, temperatures, shapes, and sizes. Only after you've been describing the target for a while can you proceed to more specific ideas and possibly names, nouns, and more analytical types of information." There are plenty of free tutorials online, and there's even a juicy subreddit on remote viewing as well, which has a daily target as well as an ongoing discussion, multiple discussions about the phenomenon, the personalities in the field, and more. Gaia.com had some other they had a lot of gold nuggets about remote viewing, but one of them was the great paradox of RV. The fainter the perception, the more likely it is to be accurate, and the less likely you are to feel confident in that perception. In other words, the more confident you are about your psychic perceptions during the session, the less likely those perceptions are to be correct. And the less confident you feel, the more likely it is that your perceptions are right on. And how is that for a paradox, they say? Which it was interesting because during the class, there was a guy that was like, I saw the tomb of the unknown soldier. And when the target was revealed, it was a volcano. And so it couldn't have been more different, but he was so confident, and good for him. I mean, he's outside of his comfort zone, learning something new. I wouldn't want to dissuade that. But I did find, as I revealed to you, that their paradox is 100% accurate. In my first complete scanning or session, my hand wanted to draw energy waves in ripples, like you'd imagine heat waves, and volcano heat waves. It was spot on. But at the time, I thought I was going off track and I chastised myself. The other detail was when I pressed the heels of my hand into my eyes very gently. And they recommended that if you're not seeing anything. And that's when I saw the clear outline of what was like an inversed plus sign, or the shape of a four-way stop as viewed from a drone in the center of the intersection up above. Well, even though I sketched it that way, I questioned it, especially after they revealed the target had been a volcano. The photo that they had used was hard to make out from the crappy video, but the exact structure of the photo, that inverse plus sign, that was exactly the same as my sketch. So at the very least, I used my third eye to predict what photo they were holding during the video. That's like 10 years old. So Billy Carson on YouTube has an introduction to RV video. I think you have to subscribe to get the rest of it, but he does mention that the key is to use and strengthen the brain to heart connection. Get those in sync, he says, and your results will greatly improve. Billy does this work through daily meditation. This coordination, he insists, brings forth information from our subconscious without it being cluttered by the conscious mind. He also insists RV taps into the 8th dimension. And you're so welcome to go down that rabbit hole. Explore why we are able to access information across time and space. But I find that a little bit dull. I just didn't have the attention for it. I don't have to know how my car engine works in order to drive. There's loads of information about RV and the whys all over the internet though, so have a great deal of fun with that. So in the course of their investigations, the SRI researchers identified at least 6 star performers with an extraordinary inborn remote viewing talent. While the names of some of them have been revealed, others are only identified by a code number. Those revealed are briefly mentioned below. The first one is remote viewing of a high technology site, and this occurred May 7th, 1987. The viewer was Joe McGonigal, and the primary target site was Electron Accelerator at the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. So the cue supplied was the name and social security number of one of the intelligence officers or the target person, unknown to the remote viewer or others stationed at SRI labs. The assignment was to describe the target person's movements and the ambience of his surroundings at 8-hour intervals during the span of 24 hours. The target person's actual movements, so besides moving in the LLNL site, the target person also visited the windmill farm just outside the LLNL premises at 4 p.m. The results, fuzzy set analysis of the various descriptions provided by the receiver showed that the overall accuracy of the remote viewing was 77% and overall reliability 78%. The reliability of the description of the windmill farm was 100%, and accuracy is defined as the percentage of target elements described correctly by the viewer, and reliability as percentage of receiver's response that is correct. So that's pretty amazing, 100%. Their second example is a swimming pool complex in Palo Alto. So this viewing was carried out by Pat Price. He was the cop I told you about from Burbank, California. He was described by Russell Targ as one of their psychic treasures. The target was selected randomly out of a target pool of sites, unknown to Pat Price and Russell Targ, who were stationed inside a Faraday cave in the radiophysics building of SRI International Labs. So Hal Puthoff and an associate, Bart, drove off to the target site, which was 5 miles away. After the allotted time of 30 minutes, Pat Price was asked to view and describe the target site. Pat said he saw a circular pool of water about 100 feet in diameter, and it was actually 110 feet. He also saw a rectangular pool 60 feet by 80 feet, and it was actually 75 feet by 100. He went on to describe a concrete blockhouse, which was also at the site. He drew a diagram of the complex. Pat said that the site seemed to be a water purification plant and drew 2 water storage tanks and some rotating machinery such as pumps, etc. And after completing the drawing and description, all of them drove to the site to assess the accuracy of Pat's viewing. Everything was remarkably accurate except for the 2 water tanks and the water purification plant, which were not present. Pat Price's inclusion of those non-existent tanks remained a puzzle for 21 years. However, the mystery was unexpectedly solved in March 1995 when, as part of the centennial celebrations of the city of Palo Alto, a commemorative volume was published. This brochure carried a picture of the actual park site taken in 1913 on the occasion of the inauguration of the city's new waterworks, showing 2 water tanks exactly at the location indicated by Pat Price in his 1974 viewing. This amazing example brings out one of the remarkable features of remote viewing, namely the ability of consciousness to access the past. In RV literature, it's referred to as retrocognition, while in ancient Indian texts, it's described as accessing the Akashic records. Okay, the third one that I'll share with you is the discovery of rings around planet Jupiter. Ingo Swann, the famous psychic who was in fact responsible for getting Hal Puthoff and his colleagues at SRI Labs interested in investigating the boundary between the animate and inanimate in 1972, suggested carrying out an experiment to remote view the planet Jupiter before an upcoming NASA Pioneer 10 flyby. Much to the chagrin of Ingo Swann and the SRI researchers, he found a ring around Jupiter, and he wondered if perhaps he had remote viewed the planet Saturn by mistake. But when the Pioneer 10 flyby did take place, it confirmed the existence of rings around Jupiter. Interestingly, a Pune-based medical doctor by the name of Dr. P.V. Vartak has contacted the writer of this article from Gaia and sent newspaper clippings describing his astral visits to the moon, Mars, and Jupiter. Here are some of the most remarkable examples of operational viewing. Okay, the following are very brief summaries of some very interesting operational assignments as reported in the declassified remote viewing literature. There was a radio listening post in the Urals in 1974. So a receiver volunteered to scan the then Soviet Union, for a radio listening post and claimed to have found one located at latitude 65 degrees, 0 minutes, 57 seconds north and longitude 59 degrees, 59 minutes, 59 seconds east. So note the astonishing precision in those coordinates. The receiver then described the detailed geographical features of the surroundings of the site as follows: elevation, 6,200 feet, scrubby brush, tundra-type ground hummocks, rocky outcroppings, mountains with fairly steep slopes, facing north for about 60 miles, ground slopes to marshland. A mountain chain runs off to the right about 35 degrees east of north. Facing south, mountains run fairly north and south. Facing west, mountains drop down to foothills for 60 miles or so, some rivers running roughly north. Facing east, mountains are rather abrupt, dropping to rolling hills and to flatland. Area site underground, reinforced concrete, doorways of steel of the roll-up type, unusually high ratio of women to men, at least at night. I see some helipads, concrete, light rail tracks run from pads to another set of rails that parallel the doors into the mountain 30 miles north. So he goes into the detail of the degrees. And there's a radar installation with one large 165-foot dish and 10 small fast-track dishes. So the above report was verified by personnel in the sponsor organization as being substantially correct. All right, this next one was the CIA's very first operational viewing assignment. The viewer was Pat Price. Pat was asked to describe what was located at a suspected underground nuclear testing site in the former Soviet Union, known by the code name Peanuts. CIA indicated that it was of great interest to them. They had in their possession a spy satellite photograph of the site. The viewer was given only the geographical coordinates of the site in degrees, minutes, and seconds, and that's called coordinate remote viewing. Pat was also told that the site was an R&D test facility. The government's representative decided that if the viewer described either the known multi-story crane or odd structures resembling oil well derricks, then they would continue. So Pat's description of this remote site in his own words were, "I am lying on my back on the roof of a 2 or 3-storied brick building. It's a sunny day. The sun feels good. There's this most amazing thing. There's this gigantic crane moving back and forth over my head. As I drift up in the air and look down, it seems to be riding on a track with one rail on each side of the building. I've never seen anything like that." This viewing assignment continued for a couple weeks, during which he drew pictures of the gigantic gantry crane and many other items at the site, such as a cluster of compressed gas cylinders, which were also visible in the satellite pictures. The gantry crane was moving on 8 large wheels, 2 on each of the 4 legs. This unique feature was confirmed by the satellite photos. The remarkable similarity of his drawing of the crane and the satellite photo can be seen on Ed May's website, www.lfr.org. So in later sessions, Pat described the activities in the interior of the building, on top of which he was lying earlier. He explained that people were assembling a giant 60-foot diameter metal sphere using thick metal gores like sections of an orange peel, but the workmen were having trouble welding it all together as the pieces were warping. They were therefore looking for a lower temperature welding material. SRI researchers were later told that the site was the super secret Soviet atomic bomb lab. They also learned 3 years later from a news item published in Aviation Week magazine that this sphere was about 58 feet in diameter, and it was intended to capture and store energy from nuclear-driven explosives or pulse power generators. So Russell Targ has commented that the accuracy of Price's drawing is the sort of thing that I as a physicist would never have believed if I had not seen it for myself. Pretty amazing stuff. You can practice this stuff by yourself because like at-home gyms, it's not only possible, it's easy to practice RV alone. Once you learn the basic administrative protocols, the basic gestalt, and order of operation, then you can visit https://thetargetpool.com and get random coordinates to practice. Then, when you've scanned it 1 or 2 or 3 times, you can reveal the target and check your homework. There's also an app you can load onto your phone to practice whenever you like, and it's called RV Tournament. As I was researching for this episode, I found an abandoned patent for a remote viewing station. The patent application is for a plexiglass remote viewing station, which its inventor, John Q. St. Clair, claimed would enhance RV results. His patent application was completely abandoned sometime after 2006. And if you want to watch a movie about the CIA's secret RV program, it's called The Men Who Stare at Goats, and it stars George Clooney, so go for it. I haven't watched it, but I think I might have to do that after I wrap this recording. After a quick break, I'm going to explain about the disappearance of Prudence Calabrese.
This Halloween, OctoberPod has the double for your toil and trouble. Tune in to OctoberPod AM, wherever you get podcasts, on October 24th to hear The Spirit Doll, a spooktacular new audio drama starring your favorite indie podcasters and written by maniacs. Then on Halloween Day, visit OctoberPod Home Video on YouTube, where Edward October will be telling Halloween bedtime stories, a family-friendly special that's perfect for getting your children of the night off to sleep. Yes, it's double the Halloween fright and double the Halloween fun when you listen to OctoberPod AM's presentation of The Spirit Doll on October 24th, wherever you get podcasts, and watch OctoberPod Home Video's Bedtime Stories for Halloween, narrated by Edward October. Find OctoberPod on the World Wide Web at OctoberPodVHS.com. OctoberPod, retro horror for bold individualists. Pull the strings!
If you haven't heard yet, the Homewrecker podcast isn't your typical podcast.
Join us, Alex,
And Monique,
as we discuss a wide range of topics.
like spiritual healing, privacy, ghosts, conspiracy theories, health, self-sufficiency, aliens, and pretty much anything else we want.
Ghosts? Conspiracy theories? Who believes in that stuff?
We do.
Allegedly.
Supposedly.
In theory. So listen to us and subscribe on iTunes, YouTube, Podbean, Google Play, or anywhere else you enjoy your podcasts.
Help us wreck and shatter conventional wisdom and ways of thinking while having some fun in the process.
Hey, that's my line.
Yeah.
All right, we're back. If you follow the tutorial link I provided in the show notes, in seconds of clicking, you'll be introduced to Prudence Calabrese. As I was working on the class, I'd take breaks and do research. Much of that began in the comment thread to that YouTube class. People kept asking, different users, mind you, what happened to Prue? Many speculated why she disappeared, which only made me all the more curious. Many, including in a subreddit thread, have a deep fondness for Prudence Calabrese. They love her fresh way at the time of teaching the RV method, and also they specifically compliment how Prue demilitarized the language around the subject and all of the language in the scan protocols. Some said Prue was, quote, hounded out of the public eye by certain truth-seeking individuals. From the thread, quote, she retired from all online RV activity in 2003 and closed her company, TDS, after a sustained campaign of cyberstalking, internet bullying, threats to her family, covert surveillance, and phone tapping by unknown persons, unquote. I dug deeper and wondered who and how Prue had made such vicious enemies, and I was not prepared for the answer. This gets dark. I just need to warn you on the outset. I watched a great documentary on YouTube that many call the nonfiction version of The Men Who Stare at Goats. It's called Crazy Rulers of the World. The filmmaker was looking into the psychic spies that the military was rumored to have used to find Osama bin Laden after 9/11. It goes into the history of the intelligence agency's psychic foot soldiers, including Prudence Calabrese, who at the time of filming had shut down her company. The filmmaker dove into that story and rooted out the information, and the documentary includes a revealing interview with Prudence. It was prior to Hale-Bopp comet skirting past Earth. Prudence and her colleague, Dr. Courtney Brown, remote viewed the comet, and they stated that there was an alien-made object hiding in its tail. Dr. Brown was featured on Art Bell's very popular Coast to Coast radio show, where he declared Courtney and Prudence's remote viewing of the object as breaking news. The two described what they'd remote viewed as similar to the Death Star in Star Wars movies, and that it was massive, filled with tunnels, corridors, and rooms. Okay, this is where you need to gird your loins, because it takes even a darker turn. All right, so unbeknownst to Prudence or Courtney, Art Bell's radio show was the favorite listening of a group of ardent believers who formed what would become known as Heaven's Gate cult. They were waiting for a sign to rejoin their people, they said, feeling the breaking news about the object in Hale-Bopp's tale was their group, their people, coming at last to take them home. As the comet neared Earth, some, including their leader, would voluntarily castrate themselves. Closer still, they would don the same black pants and shirt and identical Nike shoes, then ingest poison. They would drink poison one at a time and die. One at a time, they would go through that poisonous death, and a remaining member would cover them in a purple cloth until 39 people in total died. They would be discovered by a member who had been away and come back to discover the tragic mass suicide. As the world witnessed the comet, it was clear no object, man-made or otherwise, was in its tail. That was the end of credibility for Prudence and Courtney, and their association with the mass suicide created countless enemies, I'm sure. I have no doubt. They would try again after 9/11 to come back and establish credibility, saying that a dirty bomb would be planted at London Zoo, and their remote viewing included elephants, which is the detail that would erase what was left of their reputations. You see, the elephants had been temporarily placed elsewhere for a renovation, and thankfully, no dirty bomb was ever planted at London Zoo. During the interview of Prudence during Crazy Rulers, the filmmaker asked about all of this, and Prudence repeatedly, inappropriately laughed. I understand it's an involuntary response, and one that occurs for some people when difficult, emotionally painful subjects arise. I mean, it is uncontrollable, but it still felt awful to watch. She explained that as she watched Hale-Bopp pass by from her Atlanta balcony, she wondered where the man-made object in the tale had gone, and there was more laughter. After the London Zoo fail, she came out in public briefly to explain that her work spying on terrorists was causing death threats, cyberbullying, and more to happen, so she shut down her company. It's a horrible story, one that was a reminder to me to always add "and harm to none" to all of my prayers and intentions, no matter how wrapped in love and kindness they may be. Harm to none. We cannot predict who will do what with our best intentions. And I had little doubt Prue could have known the dramatic course that RVing of the Death Star would take, but it is off-putting that she wore a Star Trek pin in one interview. And so at worst, she was blurring the lines between reality and science fiction as she had her moment in the spotlight. And that feels like a dangerous cocktail. So how many of us are using RV to unlock abundance? There's this woman on TikTok who teaches the basics of remote viewing. She doesn't go into the nuts and bolts like all the others do because she says it's a skill we all use all the time. It's as innate as breathing. It's part of our humanness. She asks neighbors she's on a little stage and they're in the audience, and she asks neighbors to turn to each other and talk to one another, peek into each other's bedrooms back at their home, and compliment something. This quick exercise without any prep or prior setup was a smash success. She says we use RV to pick this route or that to work, this store or that, this outfit or that, and it can be used to look at a potential big purchase for any possible troubles in the future, or to, in one example, maybe a house purchase in a certain neighborhood. She RV'd the future of that neighborhood to see if a community center that was slated to be built would actually be built in the general location, because that would help to increase property values, and that helped her to make an informed decision. Some swear by it for not only day trading, but longer looks into the financial world. Just as many others say that if your intention is to prosper from RV, then all your attempts to see or scan the future will not work when it comes to money or unlocking abundance for yourself. But who knows? I enjoyed learning the process. I found the innate recollection of these gestalts heartening because I do believe we all have access to some collective catalog of information, and I'm certain we are all connected. I used it yesterday to make a slight change to a flight plan that I have, and I'll be interested to see if the other flight that I jumped off of is in some way delayed tomorrow, and I'll let you know. I'm realizing my favorite part about RV is probably the chocolate part. It helps open up our third eye, and that's as good as a doctor's prescription as far as I'm concerned. Thanks for listening to Curious Cat. Until next time, stay curious. I love you.
Hey, you. Yes, you. Are you looking for a new podcast that appeals to your scientific curiosity, but is also a little bit spooky?
Show me how I died in a past life.
Well, look no further, because this cat is where it's at.
He had concerns about the ethics surrounding AI, feeling they had achieved consciousness.
Curious Cat Podcast examines the shadowy space where science and the supernatural collide. Listen every week with your host, Jennifer Holtz, as she and her guests explore what it means to be a soul in a meat suit.
We were healing karma together. They were all kind of predestined to resolve something.
Listen on all your favorite streaming apps and continue the conversation on Twitter at CuriousCatPodCA, or find Jennifer and all her links at Jennifer L. Holtz, spelled HOTES.com.